Hello, my name is Frank Callis. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Metal Forming Incorporated, located in Peachtree City, Georgia. I'm going to take you through the RBM 25.38 machine, which is a curving machine for inch and a half mechanical lock standing seam panels. I'm going to show you the machine functions, talk to you about safety, show you how the machine runs, operate it a little bit, and then we're going to go through troubleshooting. First area that I want to talk about is machine components. It's very important for you to understand exactly what's on the machine, exactly what everything on it does. It's going to take a few minutes, but I think it's important for you to know what each thing means. Basically, an RBM 25.38 is simply a flanging machine. We have a set of flanging rollers here. These are rollers, what are called roller set number 1. We have a roller set here. You can see the large one on the outside. You can't see the one back here tucked away on the inside, but that's roller set number 2. And then we have another pair. One pushing here on this big roll, and there's another one pushing up on that big roll. This side right here is going to curve the mechanical lock male side, and this side is going to curve the female side. So what those rolls do is they grab the material and they pull it through what is the end feed guides here. This red end feed guide is one, and this down here. They're both brass, so they're going to last for quite some time, but this is the end feed guide. So your end feed guides go in, the material is grabbed and pushed through the machine. Then there's a hand wheel, which is often referred to as roller set number 5. It can be adjusted right here with this handle. Okay. There's a scale setting here, and as well as scale settings on each one of these black handles, which adjust the roller sets. Okay. So these scale settings allow us to be able to dial in the same amount of pressure on each time we run the machine. Okay. This is the outfeed table right here, and this is what's going to keep that material from going up or going down. Underneath the machine here is a series of sprockets and drives that will drive the machine around. If I turn it on, underneath here there's a sprocket and set of chains coming from the motor in the back that drive the machine. Okay, we'll turn it off. So that's what's underneath these covers. They're covered for safety purposes. Here is the proximity switch, which drives the speed. The safety switch, on/off. So if something goes wrong, you can hit this and turn the machine off. You have to twist it to get it to relieve. And then that's the on/off, or rather, more importantly, the forward and the back. The machine can be run backwards. If you have a problem, it can be run forwards just by flipping this switch. Okay. I'm going to turn the machine around now. But before I do that, there's one more thing I want to talk about, and that's the up and down roller. This roller here can move the entire assembly head up or down. So you can take a panel that's anywhere from 10 inches wide out to, I think, around 28 inches wide, and run it through the machine. All that specific information is in your manual, but you're able to crank this out, take a larger panel, and run it through the machine. It goes up and down on this shaft right here. There's also a roller number 4 back here, and we don't touch that. That roller is just set at the factory and should be left alone. I'm going to spin the machine around now so you can see what's going on the back side. The back side of the machine's got a couple things going on. One, there's the drive shaft right here that's going to that allows the machine to go up or down. If we look at it here, I'm going to turn this. Okay. Drive shaft's inside here. This shaft right here is keeping these rolls lined up from top to bottom. So if I turn, you see that turns, that moves the hand wheel rollers number 5 in or out, and you're able to see where that mechanism's taking place. The drive motor is right here. Drive motor comes down here, hits a sprocket, comes through here in a series of chains, and runs all the functions of the machine. The most important thing that's on the back of the machine, and the thing that you're going to use the most, is this scale setting here. The RBM 25.38 can be used for an inch or an inch and a half mechanical lock panel. The settings up top here are for the 1 inch profile height. It says right there in English. And down here is for the inch and a half profile height. You can either run steel, zinc, or aluminum. Okay? It gives you each one of the settings for, remember I talked about how there was one setting that was roller setting number 1, 2, 3, and then hand wheel 5. All those settings are given to you on this chart right here. Now let's talk about machinery operation. I'm going to show you how the machine works. We're going to walk through the process of setting the machine up, and we're going to run a panel. The first thing that you have to do is the machine should always be loosened here. These rollers, these ratchets shouldn't crank down, because what's going on here is there is a bolt that's being driven down into a shaft that's pushing this roller down. Right now I've locked down on it, so there's pressure between this roller and this roller, okay? So we need to relieve that before we put the panel in the machine. So I'm going to start with roller set number 1. I'm going to go to roller set number 2. These guys are nice and loose, okay? And then roller set number 3, they're nice and loose. They should be loosened like that. They shouldn't be left locked down, because if you ship the machine, quite often you can have damage to those shafts. You don't want that, okay? So we've got those nice and loosened up. The next thing we would want to do is we would crank this to the correct width for our panel. Now you can do that by using a ruler and measuring from here to there, or you can just take the panel and slide up in there and make a quick adjustment. So I'm going to grab a panel and we're going to go ahead and run apart. First thing you'll see is this is the male side of the panel and this is the female side of the panel. This will only receive the correct side, so you don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to take the material, line it up with the front end feed. Okay, slide it up in there. Okay, I'm going to get it up into the rollers right here. All right, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the machine on, and I'm going to take just a little bit of pressure and slide it into the machine. Okay, now I've got the rollers up inside the machine now, and I'm going to start to crank down my pressure. When we first went through the machine, I talked about where the scale setting was. It's on the back of the machine. This is an 1.5 inch profile, and it's made out of 24 gauge stainless, or 24 gauge steel rather. So what I'm going to do is come around here and reference to 24 gauge steel. So the smallest radius that I can do in that is 100 inches. To do that, I have to set a pressure setting of 3 up top, and 1.5 on this one, and 1.5 on number 3, and number 5 hand wheel set needs to be set at pressure setting 4. So I'm going to just do that. Okay. So I bring it around until I first feel pressure, and then I'm going to take this all the way around to 3. Okay. So there it is. Next thing I want to do is reach down here and crank these guys around until I get them to 1.5. It'll be a lot of pressure, don't worry about that. That's just, it takes a lot of pressure to bend steel. And this last setting here, number 3, take it all the way around. Okay. Then I take hand wheel setting number 5 and roll it into 4. There's a little lock down here that I can bring out and lock down, so every time it'll sit at the same place. These ratchets aren't going to go anywhere. The next thing I do is I take the hand wheel up here and I put a little belly in the panel. If it's really tight like this, what will happen is your two sides are going to fight with each other and you'll have some oil canning in the panel. So just put just a little belly in the panel, that way you don't end up with oil canning issues. All right, now I've got my pressure set up top to stretch the male. I've got my pressure set here to stretch the female, and then I've got my rollers on the outfeed to push the material. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to feed the material up into the machine. You can control the speed that the material is going through the machine with this proc switch. Because we're green at it, we're going to go ahead and turn that down. Okay? Material will start to feed out of the machine. Okay? And you'll start to see the curvature develop. Okay? You can change the speed. You can ramp it up. You can ramp it down. You can change the speed as the material is running through the machine. One of the biggest issues that people have with this machine is running multiple panels to get the machine set up. The guides on the back of this machine are simply that, they're a guide. They're not going to be perfect. Everybody in America is getting material from different suppliers. You have difference in tensile strength from 33,000 to 80,000 tensile strength steel. And so what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to set it up with the machinery settings, and then you're going to have to check it. One of the things that I recommend that you do is make yourself a template. So you see I've curved the panel and I've got some of the material outside the machine. And I have a template, pretty simple to do, made it out of cardboard. All you have to do is put down, take a line and draw your radius into it. And then we're able to take the template and we can apply it here and see how close we are to the radius that we need. And we're pretty close. We're about where we need to be. But if it was off some, then we can either add pressure, or if it was curved not enough, or if it was curved too much, we could back off the pressure. So we can make the adjustment. We can make it in one panel versus running 10 panels, running one panel, running all the way through, setting it up on the roof. I see people do that, and you just don't have to. It's a lot simpler machine than that. So I'm going to go ahead and run the material through the machine. I'll turn the speed up. I'm going to step around here to catch the panel. One of the biggest errors that people make is they don't have enough people to support the panel being run through the machine. So you end up with twist and dip right there. So that's the product that you can get out of the machine. Nice curved panel. Don't see any oil canning in it, and this is the first panel that's run through that machine. Pretty simple to do. We'll go through the troubleshooting section and you can see where there can be some issues, but that panel is correct from top to bottom. You have to check your radius on both sides, not just one. So I recommend that you take your template once you're done and you check and see. And what I find here, if I go from top to bottom, is the top's curved just a little bit more than the bottom. That's the male side. So I'm going to back off the pressure when I run number 2 through the machine, and I should be able to get a good product out of the machine. So that's the basic function. I'm going to go through it one more time from beginning to end, but I'm not going to talk as much. We'll get the panel through the machine so you can see how it works. First thing, I'm going to loosen my settings. This will be a question that everybody asks. How can I avoid doing that? There's really no way to do it. One way you can try to do it is by cutting 45s in the front leading edge of the mechanical lock panel. That way you can feed it in a little bit more easily without having to release the pressure. The other way to do it, and I've seen a lot of people do this, is you just have the next panel ready to go. You have another guy standing here. He slides the next panel in. There's no skip between them, and away they go. So I'm going to take you through the machine once again. I'm going to walk you through it a little bit slower than I normally would. First thing we want to do, I'm going to loosen these up. They are good and loose, so we're going to try to get the material up in the machine. I'm going to turn it on, support it, slide it in, and hit stop. You want to have the speed set so you don't stick it in there and it takes off through the machine. I'm going to set number 1 here. Remember our settings was at 3. But what was the first thing that we learned? We got a little bit too much pressure on the top side. It's curving a little bit too much. So I'm going to back off of it and I'm going to set it at 4. Down here, these are supposed to be at 1.5, so I'm going to take them around until I get to 1.5. A little bit too much. Okay, so I've got those set. I'm going to turn my speed down just a little bit. Okay. First thing you see, you'll have this belly. You see how the belly wants to pop out of it? You're going to get a little pop when it first goes through, and that means it's just establishing the speed. I'm going to take my template back out, and I'm going to slide it up here, and I'm going to check. Okay. I'm not bending enough now, so I went a little bit too far, but this one's about right down here. So I was set at 3, I backed off to 4. I'm going to go ahead and add some more pressure back in here and start the stretch again. Turn the speed up a little bit. We're getting a much more consistent bend than we did last time. We had a little bit of a twist to it. Roll the material through the machine. Out it pops. Got a curved panel. It's much more even from one side to the other. Set it down here, set it on its side, and that's the best way to look at it on its side, because when you're holding it up, it's going to have some natural twist to it. Okay. So that's how the machine works. It's actually quite a simple machine. The only difference is I've got years of experience running it. Next thing we're going to talk about is troubleshooting. So you get an opportunity to see how we go about figuring out what's wrong with the machine, because there will be issues from time to time, especially as you change from materials, from material manufacturers. Things can pop up and you need to know how to deal with them. Next thing we're going to talk about is troubleshooting. I'm going to take you through the 10 most common problems that you have with the machine and talk about how we go about fixing them. Number 1 is lack of power. There are 3 real sources for this. Number 1 is, this is a very different emergency stop than you see on a lot of American machines, because you have to actually twist this thing to get it to pop back out and have the power come on. So a lot of times guys they push it and they think it's going to come back out, and it doesn't. You have to twist it and it pops back out, and then you've got power back to the machine. That's culprit number 1. Number 2 is inexperienced folks sometimes can turn the proximity switch all the way down to 0. So I'm running wide open with wide speed here, but if somebody forgets and turns it to 0, you have no power and the machine's not going to run. The third component is there is actually a fuse on the frequency inverter inside of the cabinet. We're going to get into that in a little while when we talk about how to change the machine over from a 35, from 1.5 inches to a 1-inch piece. And that sometimes that switch can blow. For instance, if somebody sticks 20 gauge, which is beyond the capacity of the machine, or 050 aluminum or something like that, the machine might not like it. It might blow that fuse. Or if you're running on a long, like 120-foot extension cord or something like that, and you have too much current developed because it's trying to carry the voltage over that distance, every now and then it will blow it. Make sure you replace the fuse with the fuse that's in the machine. It'll be outlined for each specific machine, and you make sure you get the right one, the right amperage, so you don't have a fuse that blows really easily. Okay? That's the number one. The second culprit is people not taking these ratchet handles all the way around to pressure. It's pretty simple. What you do, because these go round and round, so you could actually, if you wanted to, you could think that that was 1.5 right there, right? But there's almost no pressure. So we know that if we're doing, we have to go around until we feel pressure, until the rolls come in contact with each other, and then take it to the pre-set setting on the back of the machine. It's very important that you do that, because if you don't put enough pressure on it, it's not going to feed. I'm going to put a panel in now, and I'm going to show you what it looks like not to have enough pressure. So let me grab that panel. So I've got my panel now, and I've got it inside the machine. I'm going to go ahead and set the pressure settings up to be correct, except I'm not going to do them correctly on number one. So I'll give you an idea of what it looks like when there's not done to the right pressure. Oh, got my proc switch, turn it up so I got forward feed here. Okay, so I slid the material up inside the machine. Now this is aluminum, so I'm going to set this pressure a lot differently. I refer to the back of the machine. I'm going to pull up my aluminum settings. I can wrap this down to a 25-inch radius, but I don't want to do that because I think with this long a panel I'll end up crashing it on itself. So we're going to go with a really light setting here. All right, I'm going to check this one. I'm going to set this one first, 3.7. And then these are all supposed to be set at 9. Okay, so when I first feel pressure, I start counting, and I take it to 9. Okay. Now I got the settings here, and I'm going to turn the machine on. Okay. All right. Stop. I don't have enough pressure on the top setting. You see it's running nice and straight. The other thing that will happen when you don't have enough pressure is you'll develop these oil canning dimples right here. Pretty easily fixed. All I have to do is put some pressure on it. Right now it's set at 0. I'm going to take it around to what my setting should have been, which is 9. Then generally you take a mark here and you mark it so you can take your template and see if you're getting the consistent bend that you want, okay? So I'm going to turn the pressure back up, and immediately we have a nice smooth curve here without the dimpling in it, okay? That's the biggest thing that you're going to have to remember when you go to non-ferrous materials. Copper, aluminum, and zinc have a tendency to be very dry materials, especially copper and zinc. Aluminum not that much, but what will happen is you'll get this rippling here, which means that roller is not tight enough. It's not stretching the material here enough. Okay, that's one. The next thing could happen is if we put way too much pressure here on the exit roll, okay, we could get the same thing. That is what can make this machine difficult to troubleshoot sometimes, and that's why you always want to start back from scratch, because now I could have two problems working at the same time. So you got to make sure at least one of them can be set back to the factory. So I set the top one at 9. I got a little bit too much pressure, and we should see some deformation, and we're getting it right here in the panel, okay? Not that much because aluminum's nice and soft. But it's pretty simple to dial back in. I'm going to turn this back to 3.7, lock this back down, and now I should be able to get a consistent piece throughout the rest of the panel. Okay. What happens if you have the opposite problem? Suppose you have too much pressure. So I'm going to take this top guy, and I'm going to take it around. It should be at 9, and I'm going to crank it all the way around here to 2 1/4. Yeah, 2 1/4 is about all I can get out of it. It locks the machine down. Okay. Too much pressure, the machine won't even run, okay? Take it up a little bit higher. You see what's happening now? I'm getting this dive in the panel, okay? What that means, if you look that means is it's stretching way too much on the top. It's nice soft material, and so because of this massive stretch that's taking place up here, it's not even touching this roll. It's way over bending it, and it's diving it down. Okay, that is probably the biggest thing you want to do. So here's my suggestion when you're troubleshooting an issue where you're not getting enough curve or you're getting oil canning dimples here. Set this, the hand wheel setting, back to the factory setting. That way you don't have to worry that it's wrong. Okay. The next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to take this guy, and if you're getting dimples, you're going to add pressure. If it's underbent, which means it's sticking out straight, you're going to add pressure. If you have ripples here, like we have a little ripple here, you probably can't see it on the camera, but when I went for way big pressure, it has a tendency to stretch the material and you'll get waves in it. Back off when you have that problem, okay? Those are the main ways that you're going to go ahead and have a difficult panel, is when those things go wrong. I'm going to go ahead and get the material out of the machine now and see if we can cause less of a problem than we already have. Make sure I don't hit the camera. So turn this. What that means is that you have to take this off. Because we had that material running through so one-sided, sometimes it will actually pull down. One side will be pulling much harder than the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this guide off, get it out of the way. And you see it's starting to pull down here on the guide. So I'm going to have to run the material out of the machine. I'm going to back off the pressure here just a little bit. Actually, give me a little more pressure. Okay, so that's what happens when your pressure is wrong. By the time I got to the end of the panel, the pressure was so far off on the machine that it had already twisted. One side was running faster than the other. So that's why it's important to get that pressure right, have your template, and check it before you start running product. All right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how to change the machine over from 1.5 inches to 1 inch, or from the German, they would call it 38 millimeters to 25. That's where the machine's name comes from. What you have to do is you have to remove this cover right here so you can get up inside the machine. When you change from a 1 inch to 1.5 inch profile, or vice versa, you have to affect the speed. And we do that a couple of different ways. I showed you a little bit earlier about how to change that pressure by either adding it or subtracting it. You change how fast it feeds and how fast it forms. The other way to do it is we change the sprocket up inside the machine here to slow this roller down when we're going to 1.5 inches and to speed it up when we're going to 1 inch. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the safety cover off here that covers the sprocket so we can see what's going on up inside the cabinet. One of the things that we're going to do when we change the machine over is we're going to change the speed. We do that by changing a sprocket. What that sprocket does is it causes, because it's bigger, it's going to turn less revolutions. That means it's not going to travel as fast. You know, up top when I showed you how we could, during the troubleshooting section, I showed you how we could change how the material is being fed through the machine simply by changing the pressure. We're just doing the same thing now. We're just going to do it with a sprocket because we want to make a major speed change. Because on the female side, if we don't make a major speed change, it won't feed through the machine correctly. So I pop that cover off. Now, one of the things that you should make sure that you do is that the machine is unplugged, as well as it has the emergency stop tripped. That way we know that we don't have any problems. If you look up inside the machine here, there's a couple of things to see. There's a sprocket here that drives the main drive roller on the female side. This is the sprocket that we're going to change. Not either one of these, nor the one that's underneath this cover. That's a mistake that I've seen people make from time to time. You don't want to do that. It's the first one up here. That's the one. If you look on them, each one of them is actually labeled. It'll say either inch or 1.5 inches on the actual roller. So that way you really can't make a mistake. It'll say 1 or 1.5. This is a chain tensioner. It's very important. One of the most, one of the frequent things that can happen with this machine from a troubleshooting standpoint is that this becomes loose. When that becomes loose, that chain is allowed to vibrate, and that can cause speed changes. And you know that oil canning that we saw in the panel, or when we were talking about troubleshooting, actually can be caused by this tensioner being loose and allowing that roller to roll at different speeds. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this loose, and we're going to actually change this sprocket out and change it over to a 1 inch machine. So I'm going to take the first bolt out here. Okay. Watch your knuckles, that tensioner is going to pop around. We'll take the second out there. And you'll see right here, I've actually set it up, well, luckily, where the actual link in the chain is right there. I can pop that out now and I can take that chain off. So now that we've removed the chain tensioner and the cover, what I want to do now is get the parts that I'm going to need to change the machine over from 1.5 inches to 1 inch. And they're mounted on the back side of the machine, usually right here, but I've taken this off so you can get a chance to look and see what the box looks like. It's actually mounted on the outside and says rolls and chain for 1 inch. The machine, when you get it in America, comes with 1.5 inches. So all you're going to need to get this loose is you're going to take a screwdriver and loosen the bolts on the edge of the box, which I've already done. And once that's done, you can take the top off. And inside, you're going to find a roller. This roller goes up top on the machine, and we're going to change that's going to change the male side to 1 inch. Then there's a roller for the bottom side of the machine, and we're going to install that. Then there's the sprocket. And this sprocket is actually, right here it says 1 inch on it and a number of teeth on it. So you can't make a mistake. When you're running 1 inch, you need to have this sprocket mounted on the machine. You have an extra tooth here, the link for the chain, and then we have a couple of extra bolts that are used to mount it to the back of the machine. And here's the extra chain. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and remove the sprocket. The first thing I need to do is tighten some pressure down on here so this roll won't roll around. So I've got that done now. Really all you need to do this operation is a screwdriver and then the 3 Allen wrenches that come with the part. First thing you do is you take the link out of the chain. I've already gone and done that because it's a little bit time consuming. Then I'm going to pop the chain down from around that sprocket and pull it back out of the way. Then I've got to reach up in here. You want to lock down up top so there's plenty of pressure on this roller. I'm going to start taking the bolt loose. Now the shaft that this thing is on is keyed, so you're going to have to make sure to catch the key. Not a lot of room to work, so it's going to take a second. I got it broken free. So there's the bolt, comes out, set it aside. This roller here says 1.5 on it, so you can actually see which one you're doing. So we're going to change it over from 1.5 inches now, so we don't have to worry about that. We put that one away. There's a T-slot. It's actually still on the shaft, so that's where it should be. Okay, so now I'm going to take the inch sprocket and put it back up on here. So I put the inch sprocket up in here. Try to align it with the T-slot. Right, I had to move over this side because I'm right-handed, so I've slid up the sprocket into place. I'm going to reach around here, get the bolt. And get the bolt started. Okay. It's not so easy for me right now because I'm shooting a video. It's not the natural position that I do it in, but otherwise you can't see what's going on. So it won't be this hard on you, so don't worry about it. So I'm going to pull this chain back up here and wrap it around the sprocket. Pull the other chain over. All right. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten the bolt up here just a little bit. So it's at the right position, in the right height. Okay, good enough. Pull the chain back over, pull this part over. We just pop the pin back on there, and now we've got the chain locked back around the sprocket. Now I'm going to take this. This is the chain tensioner, very important. If you don't have this, this chain can flap around. You can really have a serious problem. So we take the tensioner, and I'm going to slide it in here, find the hole, make contact, and screw it in. About halfway in, okay? Just get it started, okay? Now you can take that and use it to help you line that tensioner up, because if you try to put them both in there at one time, you're going to have a very hard time doing it, okay? So I'm going to get this one started. So I reach up in here. All right, now I got those started. Grab my Allen wrench. Hope I don't turn it the wrong way because it's upside down. All right, screw that in. Once again, you're not going to tighten it down as hard as you can. You want to tighten it down until it's still loose, but it's starting to make contact. And what we're going to do is once we get that done, you see the black piece here is still sticking out just a little bit. So I'm going to get my Allen wrench up in here where it needs to be, and I'm going to take this piece and push it in. As far and as hard as I can to get maximum tension on the chain. Okay, so that's it. We're done with the chain, we're done with the clip, we're done with this. Now we're going to turn our attention to changing the actual rollers up top. Actually, I can put the sprocket away as well. So now we've got two pieces left, okay? We've got a roller for the top and a roller for the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and start changing them. Let me just take a second to adjust the machine around. What we're going to do now is we're going to just take the bolts out of here. There are 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, and back them out. I put just enough pressure from this roller to here to lock it down so it's not going to move on me when I'm backing it out. Okay. So all those bolts are loose. I'm going to do the same thing up top. Tighten it down so there's a little bit of pressure on it. Sprocket in here and then back this out. Okay. So this I run all the way out, set it down here. Okay, I'm done with that. Back this out. Once again, you see that this is T-slotted, okay? And so we're going to want to go ahead and put the inch. You can't really screw these up. They're obviously very different. They go on very different, but you can see the difference here between the inch and the 1.5 inches, so it's pretty hard to mess up. And since the sprockets are matched underneath, it's pretty hard to screw that up too, but I guess it can be done. So you take the roll and you place it up there. You don't have to change this one, okay? Take this guy and start it back up by hand. All right, I'm going to loosen the pressure on this one. Okay, take it and pop it off. See how well machined it is. I mean, you heard it slide off there. Take this one right here. One mistake I saw a customer make one time is to use different bolts than what come on the machine, and you shouldn't do that. You should use the bolts that come on the machine, because if you use bolts that are too long, they'll actually pop out the back here and give you a little bit of a drive problem. So now I've got my rollers here. I'll take these, try to line them up right out of the chute. Just line it up, slide it in. It's machined nice and tight. If you get it off a little bit, it's going to be difficult to get up onto the machine, so you want to be careful of that. Take this, slide the bolt in, get it started. Okay. So now we've changed the sprocket, we changed the chain, put the tensioner back in. So now we've got the roller on. The last thing that we have to do is we take the red cover off up top. And we're going to change this out. Right now this is too big. If you look at the size of this versus the size of that, you'll see that it's too large, okay? We're going to take it off. I'm going to tighten this one on here first. And there are 3 bolts underneath here. So this brass block comes off. We take this and set it aside. There's another one housed right over here on this side of the machine. Just going to remove it, bring it around. Okay. There's a beveled side, and the beveled side goes back to the front end so it doesn't damage the panel when it comes in, and the square side goes right up there next to it. I'm going to take the same bolts that we took out and I'm going to put them back in. It's a pretty important thing because you can't get a panel up in there. Can't get an inch panel up in there if you have an 1.5 inch brass block on it. Okay. Now we've changed it over to an inch machine. We've got our guide block in here, our roller. We changed the chain, the sprocket, and the tensioner. So we've done everything that we need to do. The machine should be able to run inch panels with no problem. First thing we want to talk about is safety on the machine, because that's the most important thing. At the end of the day, you go home with all your fingers and toes and you haven't got hurt and nobody else has gotten hurt. A couple things that are important to note about this machine. Generally, as a rule, it's going to be used in the field, okay? So there are a couple of electrical things. The machine should be on a safe electrical current system that's not going to run to ground and is not in water. The machine is pulling 115 volts and enough amps that it could hurt somebody. So make sure that the machine is dry in a clean area and is not wet. We don't want people to get hurt with it. Also, it's really a roll forming machine. And with any roll forming machine, there's an extreme danger of being pinched or caught and hurt. Okay? Specifically, as we look here at the rollers at the top and the rollers at the bottom, I mean, they're guarded here, so you would have to work to get your fingers in there, but it can be done. What actually is more of a concern for me is loose clothing. Most of the time when people are severely injured with roll forming machines, it's because of loose clothing or hair that's caught in the machine, not a body part, and then the body is pulled into the machine. So I want to make sure that you're aware that you can be severely hurt with this machine, so be very careful not to wear loose hair, clothing, anything that's going to get caught in the machine. So we talked about electricity. We talked about pinch points. One other thing that's very important to me has nothing really to do with machine. It has to do with making panels. When this machine is on a job site, I've been on a few of them working on jobs, one of the things you want to be very careful of is that the machine is locked down. It's got rollers on it and the machine can roll, and it's important that it's locked down and it doesn't go rolling off a roof and fall on somebody because it can kill somebody. That's probably my fourth biggest point. And I'd say the last thing is when it comes to running panels, one of the things that you can do is you can build a support piece that will actually roll by taking 3 wheels and putting it on a tripod that will catch the panel and then roll with it as it goes across the roof. This keeps guys from having to back up and hold on to the panel, and you know one of the most dangerous things on a roof is backing up while holding on to a panel. These are some of the dangers associated with the machine, and you should be very, very cognizant of them and careful. Those will be the major points that I want to talk about with safety. Once again, make sure not to wear any loose clothing or anything. Keep the machine nice and dry and clean. It's very important. Let's talk about maintenance on the machine. Several things on the machine that have to be maintained, okay? Number one is all these surfaces here that you see are not heat treated, okay? These are heat treated, they're not going to rust. These, because they aren't heat treated, can rust. So what you want to do is on a monthly basis, you want to clean off any dirt or grit that's on them, and you want to treat them with a light coating of oil. Same thing goes down here. If you look up underneath the machine here with the sprockets and the chains, you're going to want to make sure that they're oiled on a monthly basis and they're nice and clean. If you run into any problems with the machine, generally if you clean it, you're going to clear up the problems. So that's the major thing from a maintenance standpoint, is to keep it well oiled and greased. The other big component from a maintenance standpoint is to make sure that these are not left locked down. There are Belleville washers inside of here, and if we lock this sprocket, we lock this ratchet down, we pull it until it's nice and tight, and then we walk away and ship it 1,000 miles to a job, say in Wisconsin or something, and those Belleville washers are going to take all the pressure of the pounding of that truck ride, and you're going to have a machine that no longer will respond to the pressure settings on the back. So it's extraordinarily important that you don't let that happen. So we're going to back off of there. Take that pressure off, make them nice and loose when they get shipped. They're not going to come out, so you can just go ahead and back off of the pressure on those. Let's talk a little bit about copper and zinc. Copper and zinc are naturally occurring metals, and they're available and growing in use in the American market for roofing right now. Copper and zinc are a little different because they're very dry materials because they're natural. Zinc Plus has a coating on the back of it and runs beautifully, and that's one of the products that's available in the market. One of the things that we found that really helped this machine run a lot better is by either using WD-40 or vanishing oil and applying it to the female as it feeds through the machine, just the female side, you'll get a nice even run and beautiful finish out of copper. Otherwise, copper has a tendency to be dry and it wants to stick a little bit and a little bit harder to drive. So that's one of the tips that we've learned after 150 machines in the market, and we know that's one of the things you can do to make your machine run a lot better. At Metal Forming, we've worked very hard to develop what we think is the best service business in our business. We have 12 service technicians, 3 full-time phone service technicians who are available for free. We have an intranet web page at www.metalforming-usa.com that gives you all the drawings of the machine so you can see any part that you need. You can pull that up and use it. Also gives you schematics if you have an electrical problem, helps you troubleshoot that. So we try to do the best job that we can, but there are going to be problems, and when there are, we want to hear from you. Either whether it's paid service or free phone service, we want to hear from you and try to take care of you because we do care about you as our customers. And thanks a lot for your business.